Guys, rent protection policies are a must-have for any landlord who owns a residential buy-to-let property in the UK. They only cost a few £100s, but they can save you thousands of pounds if your tenant does not pay rent. It's absolutely criminal for a landlord or an agent not to push it on a landlord that does not have a rent protection policy in the UK. And I'm going to tell you why. Now, they cover you for up to 12 months of rent loss should your tenant forfeit on your rent, and they actually cover you for legal cover as well, up to £100,000 should you have to go to court to evict your tenant. Some policies also cover dilapidation costs afterwards should a tenant have ruined your property inside, up to a certain amount cover, and they also cover any loss of rent cost should you not be able to rent the property because you are doing your property up after a tenant leaves. Now, we had a story recently where one of our landlords did not have a rent protection policy in place, and it was during the pandemic, which was a very, very sticky time for a lot of tenants. Prior to the pandemic, I basically told the landlord, look, you should have rent protection policies on every single one of your properties. She took my advice, and so good that she did, because after a few months of the pandemic, the tenant turned around and said, I've lost my job and I can't pay your rent. So we accessed the rent protection policy for our landlord. So what happened was immediately they don't actually pay your rent out, but they have their appointed solicitor representative to send a letter and correspond with the tenant. Lo and behold, after a few threatening letters that the tenant got, the tenant found the money to basically pay the rent. Now, the tenant's excuse prior to that was, can't the landlord just take a mortgage holiday? And it doesn't always work like that, and a lot of tenants just naturally think that landlords are rich and they can afford it. So what happened after that was the tenant paid the rent, and it was just the impetus of having the rent protection policy in place from the landlord and from us to make the tenant start paying the rent. The landlord still got the tenant in place, the tenant's still paying, it's post-pandemic now, and the rent protection policy is still in place as an insurance cover, which is all it should be. So if you need a rent protection policy on your property or want to find out more, give us a call, Keystones Property, on 01708 909 100.